Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Truth About Marketing. I got my good friend Cameo Hanlon here. She's the founder of the Bender Extender and Best Marketing Co. Cameo, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Colin. I'm glad we got to do this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we get into anything, we start everything off, put you on the hot seat, 7, 8 quick questions. So we'll do that first and then we'll start to get to know you.
All right.
Good?
Hit
All
me.
right, so first, favorite business or marketing technology?
Photoshop for sure. And the ability to make mock-ups.
Nice. Favorite social channel?
Instagram,
Least favorite social channel?
TikTok. It's not even close.
I'll have to get into that.
Yeah.
Okay, brand that you love?
I love Red Bull. I just thought I was gonna say that. I love Red Bull. That's like the North Star, I think, of kind of brand marketing and where I want to get to with something one day.
Very good. Used to be one of my big customers when I was in tech. So,
Oh, good
uh,
to know.
yeah, brand. Okay, a brand that needs help.
I would say a little bit biased, but a lot of hangover pill companies because I do find their content a little bit unrelatable. So more like No Days Wasted would probably be one, or The Plug.
Okay, cool. And favorite influencer business leader?
Alex Cooper by a landslide. Been following her forever. I just think she's such a badass.
Interesting. All right, and then brand or person you'd like to work with the most?
Buzzballs, actually. I've been, those like little. I have seen them as I'm going, and not that I've, honest to God, I've never drank one, but as I've been going to more liquor stores and everything, they're literally everywhere. Like
Hey,
whoever
we
their
need to
distributor
introduce
is.
you. We need to introduce you to our boy Joey Paris because they're the ones that do big sips and they're taking buzz balls out. So we'll
Okay, change
we'll
of
get
answer.
something going with you guys.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, anything in that realm, any crazy booze company, that's the dream partner right there. Pink Whitney,
Awesome.
that's another one. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, Pink Whitney. That's a fun one. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, so give us a little bit of background. So you founded Best Marketing Co., which is obviously a marketing company, and then that also rolled into now the Bender Extender. But let's start like, how'd you get to where you are today? Give us the full background.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll give you the Coles notes. So I took a marketing degree up in Canada at the University of Alberta. And when I came out of that, I started working at the university. That was my first and only real traditional job. And I was in marketing there for the athletics departments, actually. And it was great. It was a sweet year. I learned a ton, but I also in that learned, I'm like, man, I just want to do more. I want to have a lot more autonomy and ability to grow something that's mine. So that's where I started Best Marketing Co. So that's my first company. And that it was about 3 years ago now. So when I started that, honestly, it was one of the just easiest kind of entry points to, I don't want to say easy, but really most accessible entry points to entrepreneurship, right? There's not really an
Yeah.
overhead. I started doing a lot of social media management at the time, graphic design, websites, that sort of thing. So started doing that, and at the time was doing pretty much anything, a lot of sports, a lot of even restaurants and bars, just figuring out what worked, what didn't. And over the years, kind of stumbled my way into really serving what I call the unsexy industries almost exclusively. So do a lot of oil and gas, universities, tech companies, that kind of stuff. Basically companies that they need everything. They need it done, very well. They probably had an in-house marketer before. And either they were turning over super fast, or at the kind of salary level, they weren't getting great skill or great talent in there. So yeah, that brought us to Best Marketing Co., which now we got about 5 staff, which is awesome. So I'm out of the weeds, which is great,
Very
which gives
good.
me more
Yeah.
times to work on things like Bender Extender, and yeah. So in all that, in getting in the marketing world and getting deeper into that, I was like, man, I really want to do a product. Like I think products
Yeah.
are so neat. Getting tossed, being a marketing company, you get a lot of products that you then have to market. And I'd always kind of have ideas spinning. I'm like, man, if I were to make a product, I would have done it this way, or I would have put
Right.
X, Y, and Z into the ground levels to make it marketable. So yeah, all that kind of got me to where we got to with Bender Extender and actually launching a product. And then when it comes to actual Bender Extender, which is hangover pills for those listeners that don't know what it is, I used to mix Pink Whitney and Pedialyte when I was in college. And I called it the Bender Extender. I'd be on a bender and I'd be like, I gotta mix me up a Bender Extender to keep this going. I just always mix that up. And so I'd always been saying it. And then this past summer, I was just joking around with a few friends of mine and I said Bender Extender because we were probably on a bender. And luckily, one of them was like, Cam, is that a thing? I'm like, I don't think so. We looked it up, a couple of Google searches. Turns out it wasn't. And here we are.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's really cool. I mean, I think being a marketer myself and like I was in tech for a long time, again, talking about very unsexy things like cloud computing, cybersecurity, like it's fine, and I was good at my job, but like you said, you always go, God, I wish I could apply this to something I love or something, you know. And so I've started to work with a lot more clients and do a lot more things that at least I'm having fun with, you know. And again, I think there's two sides of that coin because there is a challenge, and the marketing for those unsexy companies is a lot harder. So having the
Totally.
ability to go ahead and apply your skills to that is a talent, but you also still want to have fun too. So talk a little bit more about, you know, what you're doing with Bender Center. You just started it not that long ago. So kind of talk about the evolution of like how you got it started, what the kind of trials and tribulations were, because obviously there's product testing, there's all these things that you haven't done. So talk about that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, and it's been a journey because it's all of our first products, and there's so many things that you don't even think about, like little things about your manufacturer and the language on your packaging and everything like that. So actually, when we started it, we were initially thinking it was going to be like an electrolyte, like a stick pack electrolyte, similar to your liquid IVs or your water boys. And we realized, first off, there's not a ton of differentiation there at the beginning other than brand. So we're like pretty saturated market. Don't know if we have enough of an edge yet. I think that's better of a secondary launch. And then two, which was really the factor, was it's really expensive to produce electrolyte stick packs at a small quantity.
Mhm.
So we're like, hold on. We knew we didn't really want to take funding. We also knew that that particular product wasn't a great candidate for funding. So we're like, let's go a step more novel and let's make a hangover pill, like a hangover capsule supplement. So I didn't have anything to do with like the actual formulation of that because I
Right.
took business, but one of my co-founders did. Yeah, I was like, you don't want whatever I'd be mixing up.
Yeah.
Trust me. So yeah, you get a Pedialyte and Pink Whitney.
Yeah. Exactly.
but
Exactly.
but yeah, that's the best I can offer you. But thankfully, Cody, one of our co-founders, big interest in natural health and a bit of a science background, and so we just started making up different formulas. This was back in the summer, and we'd buy all the ingredients on Amazon, and we'd crush up the pills, and we'd pack pills in our kitchens, and we just have our friends be guinea pigs. So I called it uncontrolled testing because we'd be on these huge heaters, just taking
That's
different
hilarious.
formulas and changing things around. When we did the formulation, we wanted to be really mindful. We didn't want anything that would make you sleepy, anything that would make you have to go to the bathroom. We didn't even want an upper in it because you take it late in your night,
Right.
and we want to be able to sleep.
Sure.
We kept it really neutral on those, and then just chose ingredients that were fantastic for liver support, for antioxidants. Activated charcoal is a big component of it, which they give to people with alcohol poisoning,
Right.
helps remove toxins from your body. So anyway, so this process, that was a big part of it. I mean, really, we were doing that formulation all the way up until probably September, October. And, some would make you pee green, some like they were all over the place. We ended up finding a really good one.
So you guys are
Really,
guinea pigging it up, huh?
oh, and man, the biggest shout out of all goes to our friends that were taking them without batting an eye. They were just like, "Yep, we'll take
No
it." These
idea what's in it.
unmarked, made in my kitchen. Like, I was wearing gloves some of the time, but like, not
It's like
really.
the Walter
So
White of hangover pills.
right, I'm like, and then it got to the point where we'd have them in these. I was buying these little Amazon bags. They're silver, pink, different colors, and then I had a little label maker that I would print off Bender Extender, and I'd put it on there. So these look like they were off the
Yeah.
streets because they were, and I'd be at bars handing them to strangers, and I'd be like,
Oh
"Hey,
God.
you want a hangover pill?" And they wouldn't even blink. They'd be like, "Yeah, absolutely," and they
So
just knock
wanted
it back.
filter making, yeah, like this girl's slanging drugs in the middle of the club.
I'm like, that could have been anything, man. I'd
Oh
always
my
joke. I'd be
God.
like, "Tell me when you feel it." Yeah.
Oh my God. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
so it was a pretty fun process to say the least. Really enjoyable. Throughout that, obviously doing a lot of I have a graphic design background, so doing the logo, doing the packaging, that was actually one of the easier components, I'd say, because we knew we actually wanted our brand is fairly simple, but our
Mhm.
packaging kind of pattern is what's really bright. It kind of gives that nostalgic MTV Saved by the Bell look and feel.
Right. I was just gonna say that's the like one of the coolest things is you kind of brought that feeling back. So for all of us that are like 80s, 90s babies, like the nostalgia's there for sure.
Right, and the 80s 90s babies who are getting deadly hangovers right now. So
Exactly. So you hit the nail
it
on the head there.
right, yeah, so it's nice. It's like not only is it in your face and like especially for point of sale or whatever, it's like, whoa, what's that? But it also kind of has that nostalgia factor, which has been huge for us. But yeah, so we are designing the packaging, doing all these things, finding a manufacturer. Another thing that we figured out is that we only wanted to do our first run. We only wanted to do about 100,000 servings. It's really hard to find a factory that'll produce 100,000 pills. Like
Yeah.
most are doing minimum 500,000 type thing.
Right.
And we didn't want to take funding because we just didn't want to dilute with where everything was at in terms of the margins, et cetera. It made sense for us to bootstrap it. So yeah, so that was another big challenge. But anyways, ended up finding a producer, getting the packaging all submitted, everything came together, and we ended up launching in December. And then since then, that's when the real fun has started, or the real
Yeah.
battle, I guess, right? So yeah.
Right on. And so talk a little bit though more about the creation of the brand, the naming even, right? I mean, you said you called it after you, that's what you already had. The Bender Extender was your Pink Whitney and Pedialyte, but then coming up with the whole idea to do a little retro, like Saved by the Bell feel, why'd you guys go that direction?
Great question. Yeah. Name had decided itself. Thank goodness. Our tagline is "Bend, don't break." That's just another thing I used to say in college. Yep. That a friend told me in high school. I think just a drinking saying. Obviously, bend, don't break. Pretty self-explanatory. But so once those things were established, I have a big interest in creator marketing, and one of the more effective ways, at the most baseline level, to have an effectively marketed creative product is to be very bright, very recognizable, and really up that recall as much as you can. So that was a factor too. It's like, okay, whatever we do produce, the name, great, that's a great starting point, Bender Extender. The packaging, I need it to be as neon, and even if it's getting a feature in the corner of a table of a story, I want to get to the point where it's like, oh yeah, that's a Bender Extender, or what's that thing, right? So that was a huge element. It's just trying to basically reverse engineer. It's like, here's the channels that I really want to be able to get traction off of, knowing that I want to bootstrap it too, that we need to kind of go that extra mile to be able to grab it as much attention and recall value as we can. Yeah. And then reverse engineer it, get to the point. It's like, okay, well, that means we're going to have to be super bright. We're going to have a catchy name. We're going to have XYZ. So that was a lot of the rationale there. If I'm being completely honest with you, the MTV kind of nostalgia part was a bit more of a happy accident. Initially, when we were doing this, I'm like, oh man, college students, it'd be a huge demo for us. They're not actually. We'll do an activation down at ASU, and half the kids are like, "Oh, I don't get hungover. I don't need it."
Yeah, they're built like tanks. They don't. Yeah, they just keep it moving.
Right? They're just 4-day bender. Get up, go to this 8 a.m. class. Not a big deal. I'm like, okay, I'm not built like that, but okay. Yeah. That actually was something that revealed itself after the fact. So initially the plan for that packaging was, okay, we found that pattern. The nice thing about that pattern is you can invert it and you can do a lot of different color spin-offs, but still maintain a pretty, like, that brand continuity. So that's why I really liked it. And then we got to, thankfully, it was the MTV and the recall, which is fitting really, really well with what's become our main demo, which is the 80s, 90s babies. Yeah. Those getting hungover. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I used to try to say, no, I'm not that bad. The hangovers aren't that bad, but like getting to the late 30s, they're starting to hurt a little worse, especially like it's not even that, like in terms of, oh, I feel terrible. You're just slow. You're moving slower. Your brain's not firing like it should. So things like this, anything you can do, like I'm all in, right?
Oh my gosh, right? I call myself the least interesting person in the world when I'm hungover because my brain's just not functional. I'm like, I'm not funny. I'm not interesting. I'm just like
the couch
surviving.
TV's about all I got.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Hibernation. That's
yeah, I'm like, do not contact me, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, okay, so now you've got that. You got it going. You did 100,000 pills, which is a very small MOQ in that space. Obviously, our friends that do like SkyMD and some of these other ones, anything supplements, health-related, not only, with smaller MOQs, it's expensive too, right? Because when they can't mass produce it, then they're going to ding you. So, what was kind of, once you got that settled and figured out, then like, how'd you figure out what your go-to-market was, right? So even if you said, okay, we figured out that college students weren't in, so we weren't going to attack campuses as much, but now we're figuring out it's like 80s, 90s babies, but how do you reach me? How do you reach other people like us? And how did you start to figure out what that go-to-market was?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Initially, like our pre-go-to-market was, okay, like we have no product in hand. The best I can do is a mock-up. And even then I couldn't, like, we don't really have a brand. We don't have there's so many unknowns. So what can we do? Well, we know that our target audience, regardless of their age, whatever location, they drink booze. So what can we do? So what we started with in the summer is I'm like, okay, I need to build up at least a platform for us. So I just did like, I'm going to do a drinking meme a day on our Instagram.
There
And
we
that
go.
was just like literally like, this is so rudimentary, but that was what we did. Cause then I'm like, well, you know what? The nice thing that we have on our going for us is that drinking content is super shareable, super
Yes.
relatable. It's rooted in humor, right? I'm not necessarily going to be sharing with my friends content about how hydrated I am, about,
Right.
but what I will share with them is how, banged up I got last night and how brain dead I am at work on Monday morning or whatever, like that funny drinking humor
Right.
you
Right.
see. So like, okay, so we got that on our side. Let's leverage that. And, is that going to convert sales? Not necessarily, but what it will do is get us followers and an audience that has a vested interest in drinking alcohol. And therefore it's probably been hungover at least once in their life, probably frequently.
Yeah.
So that was kind of our initial theory, baseline state. Step one, get an audience. So started like, and there was, our logo was on it, but there was nothing branded, nothing even mention of a product. And as time's gone on, okay, now that has to pivot. We're actually at a point now where we really need to start getting more creative with our content and getting the product in there, and not just in like a slapping product photos up, but getting really, I'd like to do a lot of skits and bits and things like that. But yeah, so that was kind of like phase one before the launch. Once we actually had product in our hand, and once we were done, doing all the stuff that we had to do to get to that point, my philosophy or my strategy that nearly drove me crazy in those first 2 months was like, I am going to do as many things as we possibly can in at this time, A, to get exposure, but B, to rule out things that don't work. Because I don't want to spend, especially with it being a small company and having limited resources, I don't want to spend 6-8 months chasing the wrong things. So we reached out to every golf tournament, every pub crawl, every bar, you name it. Like I was on the DM flinging around, asking my friends. And thankfully, especially in this market, people were super eager to have us on board. They'd let us come in last minute to their event. They'd waive the sponsorship fee. They were amazing. And in that, we were just able to figure out very quickly, okay, some huge lessons like, okay, college students aren't it. And then, actually the 40-year-old market is super huge for us. And
Right.
golf tournaments are a great fit. But nightlife actually isn't, because you can't have a conversation in there.
Right.
They're usually pretty wasted by the time they get there. All these little lessons. So I guess, and how we figured those out was that just going after literally every opportunity we could, kind of ran ourselves ragged in that point. We knew, but that wasn't going to be the cadence forever. That was just what we needed to
Well,
do right
field
off the bat.
testing. Yeah, field testing, right? You figure out, you go out in the market and see what sticks.
Exactly.
I think for what's interesting with, again, a lot of these like health, wellness supplements, things like that, it's one of those, there's no right or wrong answer. Everybody's built differently, right? Like I know
Exactly.
people that take activated charcoal and they swear by it and it works for them. And I've taken it and been like, I feel nothing.
Yep. 100%.
Still hurts. I'm still tired or whatever, right? So that's something that obviously, again, you guys will have to figure out what works for you and what works for the individuals. But I think it's super cool because, again, the market for things, products around drinking and this and that, like in one breath, you're bad if you promote binge drinking or whatever, but people are doing it anyways. So like going to colleges, it's like, are you helping? Are you hurting? Are you proliferating this whole little, then you talk about our age range. It's like people still go play golf and have one too many beers, or they go to a girls' night and have too many glasses of wine. Like
I've never done that.
I mean, well, no, and the idea that everybody looks around and goes, well, no, that's irresponsible. All right, listen, like we've all had a too many glass of wine or too many beers, right? And so the idea is, I think, just like anything else, as a part of your routine or a part of trying to be a little healthier, like this is definitely something that people could use. So I think it's really cool. I'm super about it. So I'm stoked, and we'll talk more about it. But I also wanted to talk more about your marketing company side. Obviously for myself, I started my own business about 2 years ago, merged it with a buddy of mine, Christian, who now, basically have doubled our business in size because of that. So tell me more about like what got you going, kind of what you did previously, how that molded you into this, founding a company, right? Like we all get there for a reason.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, the origin for Best Marketing Co., it's kind of funny. When I decided I wanted to start a company, one of my main motivators is I want to be able to golf more. I was like, I don't want a job where I'm very restricted to the office. And especially working in sport, a lot of evening weekends, not a lot of travel flexibility. So I was like, well, man, that's on the list. It kind of did the reverse engineer thing. I was like, these are things I want in my lifestyle. And I think in order to get there, I'm really left with this option. And I've always, liked the idea of being an entrepreneur. My parents both own their own companies, so I've always found it very neat. So yeah, getting into that, thankfully at the time I was very fortunate. I was doing freelancing at the time, and even my job at the university, they were willing to convert into a contracted, be a client.
Oh, cool.
So the jump wasn't, people are like, oh, was it scary? I'm like, no, I was fortunate. It actually felt fairly risk free, because I had great support from the people I was working with at the time. And I'd say from that point, the first year I was a glorified solopreneur. I mean, I was pretty much just freelancing myself, but under a company structure. When I made my first hire, she was kind of an extension of myself. And, that was a challenge because it's like, okay, now all these things are just living in my head, and these processes that are not on a single piece of paper need to be legitimized to a point where someone else can follow them. And then there's a workflow. And that was one thing. But then when we got the third staff and the fourth staff, that's when it was like, hold on. We actually had to take a lot of steps backwards, to be like, okay, now it's time to make this like a legitimate organization. And there's a lot of things that we were able to go a very long time without doing, and not legitimate in the terms of, structure, taxes. No, in terms of like workflow and vision and, company principles and things like that.
Right.
So that was like, that's really just kind of, I don't want to say wrapping up because it's of course continuous, but the last year was really heavy on that. And so, yeah, it was, I don't want to say steps backwards, but like you do have to invest a significant amount of time getting things ready to the point where you really can grow and sustain more capacity, more clients, etc. So that was the coolest process. And with that, learning how to delegating at first, terrifying. And it's like, oh man, it's faster if I do it myself today. No, maybe that day, but not when you do that 100 times or a year in a row, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think one of the bigger lessons, at least for me, was like, you're trying to hold on to all the money that you're making. And it's like, you really need to just come off that money and understand like, hey, if you're going to get bigger and you have a longer term vision, you need to pay people, you need to pay good people and have them around you. And again, it doesn't mean that you need to bring on some $200,000 a year, like full-time, executive, but like the idea that even if you bring on somebody that's, very solid, like, and wants to work on a 1099, maybe they have other things going on too, but they can help out or spend 20 hours or 30 hours a week. That's great.
Exactly.
We had success building it up that way. And, again, to your point, there's going to be an investment at some point. Hopefully we never have to take any kind of fundraising or anything like that. Now, again, if we randomly landed some massive client that needed it, then maybe we would. Mm-hmm. Right now, I think, we're really happy. And also, too, the idea that you can do good work and really drill down and know your clients really well and feel good about the work you're doing, that's another huge thing. Because I've had friends who, started agencies or started companies, and like the quality or the overall service just isn't as good. And so that's something too that you can talk about.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel very passionately about that last point. It, like, what I never want to do is become like an agency. I don't even really like that word. I certainly don't use it. I hate it. Because
I say consultancy because I like going to businesses and stuff, and I'm like not looking at just the market. I look at everything. So like when I say agency, I'm like, I don't really want to call myself that.
No, exactly. And agency, like, so much of the feedback I get from clients that I have is they oftentimes worked with an agency previously, and it just became this, $200 billable an hour, but like mailed in results, impersonal feel. And I'm not, of course, there's amazing agencies, not applying that to everyone, but that was a feedback I heard a lot. So that was kind of one of our big visions and big kind of foundational points of Best Marketing Co. is like, I want every client to feel like the only client. I want that to remain forever. And I want a real relationship with them. Like I always joke that the biggest metric of that success is did I get invited to their Christmas party? Right. And I mean that, like, do we have a relationship to that point? And so, and I'm sure because I don't want to get like, bigger doesn't need to mean less personal. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't really even have a desire to grow to a point where that personal relationship becomes sacrificed. Right. Like that's a kind of a top tier priority. At least on our end.
Something that's been important for me is like being able to be, like you just said, where I can get out of the weeds a little bit. Like I like to jump in and out of it. Like if something needs help or something needs attention, but like I'm more about like the overall strategic vision, looking at metrics, looking at the data and being able to apply what we're doing to that. Right. Which I think a lot of people have lost sight of.
Yes.
I talk about this a lot, like with other people. And again, the reason that I don't like to call it a marketing agency, but a consultancy is a lot of businesses and people think they just need to hire somebody for marketing or do marketing, which means like post on social media, send emails. Like that's all
Mm-hmm.
great. And that is like foundational. Like you should be doing those activities, but it has to be done with purpose. Right. And when I
Yes.
say purpose, I mean like, what's your average customer value? What's the cost of customer acquisition? What's the churn, right? Like, what are all these numbers so that we can identify where we need to invest and like what will be the most efficient for your time and resources? And the sad part is a lot of times these people, these businesses don't even know those numbers. Like, and if you don't
Yep.
know those numbers, then how am I supposed to efficiently market for you, right? Because I don't know how much we should spend on ads. I don't know how many, touch points we should be creating for these customers if you don't even know what it takes to acquire them, right? So that's a really interesting point. I don't know if that's like that for you, but I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on data metrics and how clients kind of, are working in that realm.
100%. I mean, first, like foundationally, I always say I'm like my biggest, and my staff probably are tired of hearing this, but I'm like, what's the why? Like, it's so easy to lose sight of that in marketing too. And just like you said, just start slapping up social and slapping up this, and it's like, man, like why are we doing this? Do we actually even understand what the
Right.
goal is? Is it conversion? Is it awareness? Whatever it might be. And then to your second point, yeah, actually getting into organizations a lot and realizing that those are things that we don't know, and that we will have to do some backtracking and or invest some time into figuring those things
Right.
out to, even pursue successful marketing.
Yeah.
And, because even a lot of times, yeah, you can run a metrics report on anything. But if you put that out to the client and they don't even know if that is pushing them towards their goals, or they can't even interpret it or decipher it, then we're still in a position that's not really going to move the needle, at
Right.
least to the potential that could be. So yeah, totally. I counter that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just one of those things. I mean, and again, I feel like we have a pretty good grip on our own business, like, what we're doing, what it takes to acquire a customer, this, that, the other. So, and again, when you start talking about unit metrics and things like that, especially when it's like B2C, right? So you're talking like vendor center, it's a product that you're selling and it has a SKU, and like you can sell it individually, you can sell it to distributors, you can sell all these different channels. Like when we're talking service based, you don't even have to keep track of units and product, right? It's a client to like service ratio. That's really all it is, right? And so that's what's even more interesting is when there are companies or there are people you run across that don't have their grasp on that. So, and I know it's something that you used to hear from, whether it's a Gary Vee or a Tony Robbins or whatever, right? Like, know your numbers, know your business, know your numbers, right? And that's one that I would always kind of echo to everybody. Because if you don't know, if you don't understand the data, if you don't have the data, you can't make educated decisions. And then therefore, you're going to end up making a lot of bad ones. So that's
Oh
kind of how.
yeah. No, and I totally agree. And admittedly, like 3 years ago when I started Best Marketing Co, I was like, oh, a lot of it was that, like, let's run social and let's do these things. And yeah, like I'm a numbers girl, but not to the degree. It was actually things like vendor extender and even growing Best Marketing Co itself, where I started to understand and then transfer that onto clients, just how much that those numbers matter. Like even things like for a service-based company, being able to track how many outreach or touch points you need to have to actually convert on a client. Knowing that information, then when I'm, say, 2 months down the road, I'm like, oh, I need to sign a new client. It's like, okay, well then reasonably I need to reach out to send 150 cold emails, do this, that, and the other thing.
Right.
And based on this information I have, that will sign me in. You know what I mean? Like it's so informative, and it takes such a load off when you actually do need to be doing that, or you have recurring goals, you need to meet whatever projections. Yeah. And it's so often just not there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so talk a little bit about, again, there's all kinds of different ways that people are addressing marketing these days. Again, we talked about email campaigns, talk about funnels, you talk about influencer marketing, TikTok shop. Like there's all these different ways that you can attempt to sell a product or service, right? What are you finding? Again, it could be with Best Marketing Co. or with Vendor Center. What are some of the tactics or the things that you're seeing that are working the best?
Yeah, so what I have been really a fan of with vendor extenders specifically, again, a lot of for quick context, I went through a couple accelerators for a creator marketing startup I was working on. It's called the Talent Effect.
Mhm.
And that was really catered towards small to medium-sized brands, startup brands, people with limited budgets and resources. Because as we know right now, and influencer marketing, I mean, it's kind of the Wild West, to be completely honest, but it also can be very expensive, very cumbersome and tedious to access. So anyways, that informed a lot of the influencer marketing, creator marketing I'm doing for Vendor Extender. And one of my big philosophies there is like, okay, I want to essentially be able to utilize people in a very specific area, obviously, with specific audiences in a very specific time frame. And I want to be able to basically I call it manufacture the frequency illusion. So make people believe in Scottsdale, for example, that is everywhere. Vendor Center's everywhere. No, it's not.
Yeah.
But we're using, I have what's called the $7 creator program. So I'm just constantly reaching out to a lot of people in the hospitality industry and people that wouldn't even necessarily call themselves influencers by any stretch, but people with solid followings. We ship them a party pack, a vendor extender with a note. So with shipping and everything, it's all in $7 cost. And their obligation is just a review and a story. No crazy in posting. We're not chasing them around because we did a more engaged influencer program with merch and everything. And then you start running into, they don't post and then you're badgering them. And that's just some of the roadblocks we ran into and, limited time and resources. How can we make it as easy as possible? So getting back to your original question, one of the big things I like to do is, okay, so we're running this $7 influencer program, getting a lot of that like organic, just story reach, basically, between 10 and 20 people doing that a week, running ads very targeted to the Scottsdale area, and then, taking part in events very targeted to the Scottsdale area. So it felt like there was getting to a point where people were like, wait a minute, like, I feel like I'm seeing this everywhere. Like my Uber driver, I took a bender extender in the back seat and he looks up through the mirror. He goes, is that a bender extender? And I was like, what the hell? Like, we don't know each other, right? My server the other day at my restaurant, had one on the table. She goes, oh my God, I bit it the other day instead of swallowing it. And I was like, this pill? She's like, yeah, the bender extender. So things like that, I'm starting to notice that. So basically, long story short, a concentrated like effort in a time and area can be pretty cost effective, but get you some pretty big brand awareness and like perceived legitimacy that can really help fuel sales, right? Now that we're actually just selling a lot in the area based off what I think was months of really trying to build that name in a way that was realistic for our resources.
Yeah, I mean, I had this conversation with Jay last year about Jay Dang, who owns 5 Star Fitness, about the idea of micro influencers versus, traditional influencer or somebody. And the idea that those people, even though they only have 5,000-10,000 followers, like they are active, watching, like going to make informed decisions based because they trust their friends. They trust this person that like, they're not just hawking a product, right? Like if they posted it, they're actually using it, right? And I think we've been so trained at this point that a lot of things are happening where I look at something and go, oh God, it's just an ad, right? Like I can see right through it and go, this person doesn't actually use this, or maybe they do, maybe they don't, but it's an ad. Whereas when I see somebody, drinking a Sky MD or whatever, like I drink this stuff every day. It's not an ad. They don't pay me. Like
It's just there.
It's there. And so I think that's super important to understand. And then again, with clients and whatnot, like they're always just, the efficiency is everything, right? But to your point, it took months and months of like trial and error and figuring things out to understand and testing, right? And unfortunately, there's no way around it. You don't know how people are going to respond. You don't know if an influencer is going to be it, if it's going to be golf tournaments, if it's going to be a car show, if a wine night, like, dropping them with the little petty bikes. Who knows, right? Like you just have no idea. So I think patience is something, right, that you got to preach. The flip side of that is I also don't advise people to just throw money at everything. Be calculated, do your research. I mean, you can extrapolate a little bit more on like market research you did for the Bender Center, but.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's like, as important as it is to get experimental at times, it's like, okay, within bounds though. Yeah. Understanding, your why, who your customer is, where do they live? It's kind of crazy actually how many people don't even understand who their customer is and what they do. And I remember it's so funny when I was in like business school and we'd be going through like just your typical marketing course and they'd be doing the whole customer persona. I was like, isn't that overkill? Like, isn't it? No, it's not. It's very vital.
All these little, what are they? The acronyms, right? ICP, ideal customer profile. It was drilled into my head so much, but nobody else really knows what they are. But in my head, I got it.
Right. Exactly. I'm like, oh man, like that is huge for the program. But yeah, in terms of understanding that customer for us, like we kind of were able to, I kind of joke that all us founders, we have a lot of experience in the partying industry, right? Like personal customer experience. Not that we're relying on that solely, but when it came down to like the research that I was doing formally for the company and even things I've been encountering over the years, what we noticed is there's a lot of hangover competitors. There's plenty of people in the space, no shortage of those, which is a good sign. It's signs that it's a valuable or a viable, a sector to be in. But what I was noticing a lot is that they're very corporate, very professional, very science-based. And I'm not saying that those are bad positionings,
Sure.
but we weren't seeing anything that was like actually positioned in partying and like adjacent to the ridiculousness of boozing and the humor of it and the group trips and that sort of thing.
Yep.
So then we started kind of pressing on that a little bit more. We're like, okay, well, why is that? And, then if we are thinking we're going to be that person, who are we appealing to? And what are those people doing? Some of the one of the misses was college, and not that thankfully it's not like we got super deep in that. I just kind of figured based on their drinking habits, etc., that they'd be someone for us, but they don't have money and they don't get hungover, so
they're not good buyers. Yep, they're not good.
They're not good buyers. One thing that's even revealed itself just through being more active is like moms don't want to be hungover at all. They can't be, but do they want to have a wine night? Hell yeah, right? Yes. So just things like that. But yeah, kind of and get it.
Sorry? I was gonna say, I think like there's a very similar kind of trajectory or talk track of how IVs have gone, right? Like IVs were meant for people who were dehydrated that like not from drinking, but from like, excessive heat or like they went to the hospital. But then all of a sudden one day somebody was like, well, dude, who are the most dehydrated people on the planet? Hungover people. Let's pop some IVs in them. Oh, let's charge $200 for a $20 bag, if that, right? Like, but people need it and they feel better. So like, it's one of those things. I totally see the vision where it's like everything, like IVs were not sexy. IVs weren't cute. People don't like needles. They were not something that you wanted to proactively go take. Like none of that. Same thing here. So they likened those IVs in the bags to partying and having fun. And hey, we can make you feel better. Don't feel guilty about partying. This is kind of the same thing. Like nobody else is really doing that or doing it well, at least. Right. Yep. So there's an opportunity for Bender Extender to come in and be like, hey, we're going to be that IV in a pill form. Right.
Right, exactly. We're just as fun as you. We're like, we're not beating around the bush. Like, why are you taking this pill? Because you've been boozing. Like, why do you need it? You might be on a bender yourself. You also might not be. Like, that's the one part about that name. But what we're noticing is that, even the corporate connections like it. They find it funny and they're not shying away from it. Of course, the Bender Extender, the name itself, will make us a non-fit for many events and many organizations. That's fine. You can't market to everyone, no one.
Yeah.
If you're marketing to everyone,
you're marketing to nobody.
Marketing to nobody. Exactly. But yeah, very similar to like the IV. And what the IV situation really did too is it's like then that idea of being lined up with your friends on a group trip with an IV in your arm, now that's an experience part. Right. And that's kind of all part of that humor. And that I think has really helped that industry grow, is that kind of element and how they can lean into that. And we're trying to do the same.
Yep. Absolutely. And so now what's your kind of plan for growth? So you did the 100,000 run. It seems like you're selling individually to like, whether it's gas stations, liquor stores, like, places where people would grab that while they're grabbing some beers but kind of what's the growth plan now? And what are you foreseeing? I know you also mentioned distributors. So
yeah. So where we're at right now, like obviously priority number one or ongoing priority is building our direct to consumer, right? Those are the best margins we'll have. Fantastic. So building up our online sales as much as we can. And then right now, one of our biggest focuses is getting into retailers and just kind of getting those wholesale orders. So right now, what we've been finding good success with is actually with your bachelorette planning kind of services, those things, because they buy wholesale. Because like what is 99% they say of their clients ask for? Hangover kit. Done. Right? So really just looking to develop those relationships to be moving X 100,000 whatever of units monthly, and kind of get that more predictable, like recurring buys, building up the direct to consumer, and then getting into point of sales, your liquor stores, even like your smoke shops, convenience stores, things that if I'm bringing a 40 a Fireball up to the till and there's a hangover pill there and the guy's like, hey, it looks like you might want a Bender Extender, I'm gonna be like, yeah, sure. So developing those. So right now, I've said this a few times, we bootstrapped it. So we are doing everything. And I really need a distributor because I can only walk into so many Mesa smoke shops myself and pedal Bender Center, which I love doing, by the way. I love being boots on the ground, but being able to kind of get to that next level of distribution is something that could be really huge for us. And then in terms of long-term growth, it's like, okay, we kind of have our sales point that's going to trigger our next run of production. Be bigger, a little bit better. We're fortunate we have great margins right now, but get that higher MOQ and then just kind of keep pursuing getting more strategic about like our partnerships. I'd really like to get into some brand collaborations with Buzzballs or whoever your friend's company is,
Yep, big
people like
Sim.
that.
Yep, let's go.
Yeah. And for two reasons, like of course for that brand awareness and to really start like illustrating that like party lifestyle, but then also with a lot of these organizations that are so present at events and so present at festivals and things like that, to be able to form those partnerships and then start having a presence of those things too will be huge for us for both sales and
Yeah.
just getting the brand out there. So yeah, that's kind of the Cole's notes, and that could be a long one, but of the things we're focusing on right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's just stages again, too, testing and seeing what works and what doesn't. But I think one of the other big kind of evolutions right now is people trying to see how far these things like TikTok Shop and other affiliates and whatnot. I mean, affiliate marketing has been around forever, but it seems to be that it's created a way for people to not have as much skin in the game. I only have to pay you if you make a sale, right? It's the idea that it's like, so talk a little bit about like what affiliate marketing and or influencer marketing from that perspective, because for us, when we're doing, selling services and selling marketing services, it really doesn't apply to us. But like when you're talking about, like I can give a referral bonus or something, but like the idea that I'm going to be able to pull in a bunch of clients based on somebody else selling for me is not the same as like a direct to consumer good, like the vendor extender, where if I make a fire TikTok video and 80 people buy it, right? Like 1,000 people buy it, then I get paid, right? But you don't pay me until that sale is made. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I see this because I've spent so much time to just like honestly studying influencer marketing. I see it both ways, right? It's like, okay, from the brand perspective, especially as a startup, you really need a cost effective, kind of guaranteed way to pursue the sales channel, which is influencers. From the influencer perspective, though, it's like, yeah, your real estate is valuable, your advertising space. I don't necessarily want to be representing a product that I have zero guarantee. But at the same time, it's like, okay, but if you're worth the spend, then you will convert, or your audience will convert, right? So I see it both ways. But what we're doing, and yeah, transparently, we have $0 for influencer marketing budget in terms of paid influencers. So what we did is, we're running this $7 influencer program, and we're running it at a pretty large scale. Like we got a lot of people in it. And then what we do is what we're noticing, and I think like we're very fortunate. A lot of the people that do the trial, they love the product. Like they're like, oh my God, I felt so good. I'm a huge fan. So then we offer anyone that, gets into our creator pool, we're offer, hey, if you'd like to, we'll make you an affiliate code, no pressure. And I find that way, it almost kind of feels like it's like, they're like, okay, this is a bonus. It's a value add. Yeah. They have followers asking about it. So the willingness is high and the conversions are, honestly, we've only been running that for a month, so decent. But yeah, so that's kind of our step. We're kind of getting them into our creative program at a really like low commitment and low expectation deliverable area. Then they have the option to kind of sign on as affiliate. We also are using affiliates in a little bit of a higher tier too with some creators that I have relationships with that I'm like, hey, I'd love to pay you, but I just can't right now. Will you take this increased, commission link? Like we'll do it much higher than our typical, with the expectation that, if you are making sales, and we'd love to discuss kind of like a good faith agreement there about future sales. But yeah, those are the two tactics we're trying, and just being realistic about our budget. And thankfully creators have been super supportive, and there's been even some big creators that are just like, you know what, I love the product so much, I'm willing to rep. And hopefully down the road we can have something that's paid. But yeah.
Perfect. Well, so where can people find Bender Extender today? Where are we looking? Where are we getting it at?
Well, okay, the best case, benderextender.com. And I ship it right now personally. So I'll even write you a handwritten
bonus of Cameo coming to your door. Wow.
I use USPS, but I will write you a note. I used to hand deliver, actually. I'd be like running up, they'd pull up in their car, they'd be like, hello? I'm like, oh, sorry. We use postal services now.
Personalization sells. Listen, okay, if you were coming to deliver to people, I'm sure they'd buy more of it.
I do write a note. I do write a postcard by hand every single time. So benderextender.com, and then there's a handful of liquor stores. Devil's Liquor, 24/7 convenience in Tempe. There's a bunch of Empire. You mime over at Empire.
Love it.
Yeah,
yep,
so hopefully
there.
Yeah, exactly. Ever growing place, and I mean, big. If you know of anyone that they think it would be a good fit for in terms of retail or distribution, we're all ears.
Vendor extender, whoever needs to start distributing, here's your chance. But
if you think Cameo, your customers could extend their vendor,
yeah, Cameo, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us. Hopefully, we'll get to see you again here soon, but I'm sure we'll be talking.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. You got it.